Hi, and welcome to Experience Week. We are excited to have you with us today. This presentation is titled Introduction to Conjoint Analysis by Craig Lutz of Qualtrics and Jim O'Brien of JetBlue. Before we jump into content, some quick housekeeping items. Feel free to share this event with your colleagues. It's not too late to register. Let others know you're watching by tweeting at Qualtrics with hashtag Experience Week. All content from today is available on demand. Enjoy! The time is now yours, Greg.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining this webinar today on conjoint analysis. It's something that I'm pretty passionate about, and I'm excited to be here today doing this webinar. So, conjoint analysis is a survey methodology for helping us understand what features and attributes of a product or a service are most preferred. And so we're trying to gauge and understand how our customers feel about our product or service and the various attributes that make up that product and service, and what really drives the needle when it comes to preference and likelihood to purchase. So today, as part of this webinar, there's some questions that we want to answer, and those questions are when to use conjoint analysis, the different types of conjoint analysis, the different steps in how conjoint analysis is conducted, what output should we expect to get, and then what is the value of conjoint analysis. All right, so when to use conjoint analysis. So we want to use conjoint analysis when we have a set of products, or we have a product or a service that's made up of a combination of features. So let's take a hotel room as an example. So a hotel room is made up of a number of attributes or a number of features. Those might include cleanliness, the breakfast, is it included, is it not included, does it have a balcony, does it have a good view, is Wi-Fi included, and what is the cost of the hotel room? Is it on the lower end of the cost? Is it $50 a night, or is it much more expensive? Is it closer to $400 or $500 a night? So we have our product, and in this case it's almost a product and a service, the hotel room, and then for that hotel room we have certain features that are available. And so this is another way to look at those features. And so what we call this is a nested hierarchy, but by that I mean that we have our feature, so in this case we have Wi-Fi, and then we have levels within that feature. So we have free with the room, or it's not included. Our next feature would be breakfast, and then with the different levels for breakfast would be buffet, maybe it's not included, or maybe it is included and it's a room service will deliver that. And then price is usually a feature that's a part of a lot of conjoint studies, and so again, price would be the feature, and then we have levels that within that feature, so the different costs per night. And so this is the structure that we're looking for a conjoint analysis study. Do we have this nested hierarchy, or do we have features and then levels that reside within those features? So the next question would be, what types of conjoint analysis are there? What are the different methods or approaches with conjoint analysis? So my dad really thinks that he really thinks of himself as a handyman, and he'd always tell my mom that he didn't have the right tools for the project, and so that usually resulted in him going down to Home Depot to buy a new tool, even if it didn't have anything to do with the project. I think he just liked buying new tools. But with conjoint analysis, it's very much the same, where there's different tools or different approaches for different types of projects. And we'll go through those different tools, or there's different types of conjoint analysis. And the ones that we'll speak of today, choice-based conjoint analysis, adaptive choice-based conjoint analysis, self-explicated conjoint analysis, menu-based conjoint analysis, and one we won't talk about will be max-diff analysis, which is a topic in a webinar all of it in itself, but it's somewhat related to conjoint analysis, but that will be for another webinar. All right, so choice-based conjoint analysis. This is definitely the most common approach in the conjoint projects that we run here at Qualtrics, probably 80% of the projects we run are choice-based conjoint analysis. Sometimes it's referred to as discrete choice conjoint analysis. They're the same thing. Choice-based and discrete choice are the same type of exercise. And essentially, it is when we place 2 or 3, maybe 4 options in front of a respondent and have them simply select which one they most prefer or which one they'd be most likely to purchase. It's a simple selection. It's a binary choice or a discrete choice where they're selecting the one that is most preferred or they'd be most likely to purchase. It's a great approach, and the reason it's the most common approach is because it really models decisions we make every day. And so every day we see different options at the supermarket or on TV, and we simply make a selection based on which one we're going to gain more utility or more satisfaction from. And so here we have 2 different sweatshirts. We have option A and option B. The first one consists of different attributes than the second one. So the first is a crew sweatshirt that's gray that has a logo, whereas the other sweatshirt, option B, is a hooded sweatshirt that's red with no logo. And so there's different configurations that are placed before the respondent, and they would simply select which one they have more preference for or which one they'd be more likely to purchase, however we're wording that question. So the next type or next tool would be adaptive choice-based conjoint analysis, and this is a variation or kind of an add-on to our choice-based approach. But the reason we would use adaptive would be because we have a large number of features that we're wanting to test. So usually with choice-based conjoint analysis, we're usually in like maybe the 3 to 8 or 9 features. With adaptive choice-based, we probably have 10 plus features, and in order to avoid respondent fatigue, we're going to use adaptive choice-based analysis, conjoint analysis, so that we can reduce the amount of fatigue, so that we can reduce the number of questions we need to ask the respondent and be a little more efficient in our survey time and questionnaire time with the respondent. And so what the adaptive choice-based conjoint analysis does is it, based on the selections and the preferences that the respondent indicates, we will adapt future combinations and future product configurations that we display to the respondent based on those previous selections. So essentially, as the respondent goes through the survey and through the conjoint exercise, the survey is getting smarter and smarter as they progress through and adapting the packages based on their previous selections. So you can think of this as YouTube, where based on the movies that you watch, I really like basketball a lot, and so I watch a lot of basketball highlights. And so when I return to YouTube, it recommends certain videos that are basketball related or sports related, and so they've adapted my future and my current YouTube experience based on what I've selected in the past. Similarly with Amazon, Amazon loves my wife. My wife loves Amazon. It's a mutual relationship there. But Amazon as well, they adapt your shopping experience based on selections you make. We have some little kids at our house and diapers, and they recommend diaper wipes, and they recommend other baby clothes and toys based on the selections I've made and the purchases my wife has made, maybe I should say, because I don't make as many selections as my wife does. But additionally, Pandora is the same, where based on the selections you make in Pandora, whether you like songs or dislike songs, they're going to adapt the future songs that they play for you based on those previous selections. So this is that idea that with adaptive choice-based conjoint analysis, we're going to adapt the combinations and make the combinations more and more appealing to the respondent as they go through this survey. So another type or tool for conjoint analysis methodology would be the self-explicated model of conjoint analysis. So this is the only model that is fully available in the standard Qualtrics license. It goes with every Qualtrics license, and this is a more direct way at asking respondents for their preference and feelings towards the different features and levels. Rather than conjoining the packages, so in our sweatshirt example, we had a gray crew cut sweatshirt with the logo, so we combine those into a single product. These deconstruct those packages, and we ask about the levels independently. So let's say our example, let's say we have a sack lunch would be our the product or the service that we're looking to test with our conjoint analysis study. If we went with the self-explicated approach, we would ask about the fruit in that sack lunch independently. So we wouldn't ask about like a combined turkey sandwich with Chips Ahoy cookies, with a juice box drink, and an apple. We'd ask independently, how preferred are these different fruit options? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how preferred is an apple? On a 1 to 10 scale, how preferred is banana? On a 1 to 10, how preferred are the grapes? And we do that sequentially with our different features that we'd ask about. So we'd also ask about a turkey sandwich, how preferred is that? How preferred is a ham sandwich, and so on, across the different attributes that we're looking to test. And from that, we'll be able to get the same understanding from like a choice-based study about what's really important, how preferred are the different options that are a part of our product or service. So it's definitely a different approach because we're not conjoining the packages. We're deconstructing the different attributes and asking about them independently. There's some pros of that, a lot of cons, but it's just a different approach for gathering this type of feedback. Okay, the last type of conjoint analysis we'll talk about is the menu-based conjoint analysis. So this is definitely a great approach in some use cases. In a lot of other cases, is maybe not the best approach. But what we do here is we allow the respondent to create their own packages. So we would present them with the different options and then let them create their package or select the different options that they want included in their product or their service. And where this is really useful and where we use this the most is when it really models the experience that the customer would have in the real world. And so when you go to the supermarket and you're buying detergent, you can't really say, okay, I want you to mix up some detergent for me that smells like lavender and gets the stains out to this level, or is this size of container. You can't really create your own combinations that way. But let's say with like a cell phone plan, a lot of times you go and create your own plan. So I need this many minutes, I need this many dependents available, or this many additional lines to be a part of my plan, this much data. You're creating your own package with your cell phone plan. And so the studies we've seen going really well with menu-based conjoint analysis are those that really model that experience in the real world. So like an example, we recently ran a cell phone study with a menu-based conjoint approach that went really well because it felt really familiar to respondents. All right, so with our next question, we're going to go through how a conjoint analysis study is conducted. What are the different steps for conjoint analysis? So those steps, and we'll go through more of these in detail, but at a high level, first we need to determine the feature set, the different features and levels, that nested hierarchy that we talked about. We need to determine what those look like, what that configuration is before we go into the study. Once we have defined our attributes, we'll generate our experimental design. Once our design is set in stone, we'll move to programming the survey and creating those questions, after which we will collect our responses. So we'll actually send the survey out to our respondents and gather that feedback, gather that data. And then once we have that data, we'll move to analyzing and modeling that data, and then creating our reports and different simulators to provide to our to the end user or the end customer. So the first step being the features to include. So we kind of went over this when of when to run a conjoint analysis study, but again, we're looking for this nested hierarchy where we have this structure of features and then levels within those features. So when we have this type of structure, a conjoint analysis study is appropriate, but we need to make sure we lock down this type of structure or our features and levels before we go any further in the study, because our design, our survey programming, all the steps afterwards are directly tied to the features and levels that we will include. And so it's important that we lock down and really determine what's important to include in our study before we go any further. And so this is sometimes a little trickier than it may seem, because some groups maybe want to include a lot of different options, and there's battles within departments on what should and should not be included. But it's really important that you have kind of a uniform approach, and you're solid on the features and levels that you'll include in the study. The next step is generating the experimental design. And so oftentimes in our studies, based on the number of features and levels that are a part of our study, we have so many different combinations that are possible that we obviously can't show all combinations to every respondent, because it's just, there's thousands of combinations, and our respondent obviously can't go through all 1,000 combinations. So we need to show a strategic subset of combinations to the respondents, while still making sure that we have the proper balance and coverage in our data that allows us to get good insights and have sound analysis on the back end so that we can trust the results. And so we'll generate the experimental design. There's a lot of softwares that help with generating experimental design, but you're looking to generate some kind of fractional factorial or a subset of combinations that you can display to the respondent, with two purposes. One, trying to avoid respondent fatigue, while two, making sure you have the proper balance and coverage to ensure quality results. The next step would be to actually program the survey. So Qualtrics is a great resource for programming and conducting these conjoint studies, because of all the different question types that we offer and the different questions that can surround the conjoint analysis exercise. But with a choice-based study, it would look something like this, where we present two different packages to the respondent and allow them to select between the two. All the different types of conjoint analysis that we went through earlier can be ran through Qualtrics. Some are easier to set up than others. Some might require a little bit of additional programming, but all are possible through Qualtrics. But making sure your survey is set up in a sound way, making sure the data is clean and everything is being collected correctly, is a major step in conducting a proper conjoint analysis study. Making sure it looks clean and it's intuitive to the respondent is an important step with conjoint analysis, because that allows us to collect the data, and then once we've collected that data, we then analyze the data. So what we're trying to do with the conjoint analysis data is we're trying to model, is that level, so let's say Wi-Fi, going back to our hotel example, we have the Wi-Fi included or not included. When Wi-Fi is included in a package, does that make the package more or less likely to be selected, or more or less likely to lead someone to purchase? And so we do that across all our features and for every level. So with all our cost levels, with all our breakfast levels, we're going to model, does this level lead someone to be more or less likely to prefer this combination? And so there's different techniques for doing that modeling. You can use like multivariate regression techniques. We commonly use hierarchical Bayesian estimation for modeling those utility scores, but you need some kind of statistical modeling technique for deriving and calculating these utility scores, because those utility scores tell us how preferred and how important the different levels that we're testing are. And then from those utility scores, we can generate the different reports, the different metrics that go along and are common with conjoint analysis projects. And that kind of takes us into the next step of what output do we get. So with conjoint analysis, the metrics that we'll derive from from those utility scores, what we're trying to understand are how important is the feature, and then within each feature, how preferred is the level. And so here's a diagram of a display of a report that we might send a customer or an end user who's looking to receive the output of a conjoint analysis study. So first, over here in the left columns, we have the feature, so cleanliness, breakfast, balcony, Wi-Fi, cost, and the column that's next to that indicates how important is the feature. So how important when someone looks at the combination is cost. So cost is the most important feature, and it usually is in most conjoint analysis studies. We can see that cost is the biggest influence in someone's decision whether or not to select or purchase this hotel room. The next would be cleanliness, Wi-Fi, then breakfast, and then the balcony is of very little importance to the people that we surveyed. But then we can dive into one of those features. Let's go into cost, and we can see the different preferences for the different levels. And so we can see this level preference share, which tells us how preferred are the different levels to our customers. And so we can go to each of the levels across all the different features and see how they stack up to each other and how much of a driver are they when someone's decision to purchase or to select a package or a product, or ultimately a product or a service. And so the last question that we wanted to answer is, what is the value of conjoint analysis? So conjoint analysis is great in a lot of ways. It's this perfect, or I think it's this perfect mesh of marketing and math that really allows us to really dive in and do some scientific analysis on people's selections and then why they purchase and what's important to them. But one of the real powerful things about conjoint analysis is that it really models real-world decisions that we make every day. And so because of that, we get highly relevant data. And so something that's very familiar to all of us is going down to the supermarket and selecting, like I think I mentioned earlier, a laundry detergent. There's different options, there's different brands, there's different scents, there's different claims that they all make, and so we have to look over the different options and select the one that we're going to get the most preference from. Maybe it's the cheapest option because we don't really care about the other features of a laundry detergent. Maybe it's just the cost. But that's something that each and every one of us makes or experience that each and every one of us goes through on a daily basis. And so conjoint analysis really leverages that experience that we're all very familiar with of making a decision across different product configurations or different options and selecting the one that will get the most utility or benefit from. And then from conjoint analysis, we can simulate different product configurations and understand how they will perform on the market. And so maybe we're going to market and we're doing some competitive analysis and including some of our competitors' features and levels within our conjoint analysis study. We can see how and simulate how our configuration or different configurations that we're testing, how they might compare to this competitor, and what percentage of our respondents will select this product configuration against our competitor's product configuration. And are males or females more or less likely to select ours versus the competitor? All that can be derived, all that can be simulated using the conjoint analysis results and those utility scores that we derive. And so next, we're really privileged to have Jim here to go over like an example of when they at JetBlue used conjoint analysis.
Thank you, Craig. Some of you probably have heard, but recently JetBlue, we switched credit card providers, and this was a pretty big deal for the company, and it took a ton of man hours. During that process leading up to the switch, our loyalty team, or better known as TrueBlue, they were finalizing benefits of the new credit card, and they wanted to know what do customers value the most in terms of certain attributes within a product that they were planning to offer. With our loyalty team, their big focus was actually on a companion pass, but as we go through this example, we're going to be focusing on credit cards since it pretty much seems that everybody has one, or the majority of the population does. When this request came through, honestly, we thought that this was the perfect opportunity to use a conjoint study, as we had remembered some of Craig's presentations from one of the first Insight Summits. We did have the internal resources to pull it off. We kind of had some beginner level knowledge, but we thought, Craig's a prodigy in this area. Why don't we reach out to him and see how him and his team can kind of support us in this endeavor and this request that came through. Kind of moving in, a credit card program, it's perfect for a study, as it forces us to understand, what's an ideal mix of attributes and features for a card. When you look at a credit card, there are a ton of ways to combine these attributes and levels and ultimately come up with a product that you want to offer to your customers. So as you can see on the screen with our features, we would talk about an APR all the way down to minimum spends for bonuses. But within each feature, there's multiple levels that you can kind of offer to your customer, and that's where this request came through. Our loyalty team was a little confused as to what is the ideal mix, and ultimately when we go to market with the product, what is going to kind of give us the biggest bang for our buck. Credit card companies and airlines, they offer these different types of cards to kind of lure customers in with free miles and flights, and ultimately, we're trying to hope that they'll only use that credit card and only utilize that airline. It's almost like we're kind of buying people's love with the multiple amenities that we offer to them. As we were building out these products, we needed to be able to provide a product that maximized adoption with the hopes that it would ultimately lead to frequent use by our customers. This is where we start to see really the benefit come back to us and where Conjoint is going to help us out quite a bit. As we were building out these features within the card, the big thing that kind of came up with our loyalty team was trying to understand what do customers want, but also what's going to benefit the company at the same time. And this is where we were really trying to better understand, what is ideal for both sides. We need to take into account not only what the customer wants, but the company. And honestly, sometimes these aren't aligned. And it makes sense because one side wants something and the other side wants another. As we look at the example, obviously no customer really wants that Evil Corp ideal. You can see that they have the high APR, low mileage bonuses, and obviously no free bags. But when you look at that customer ideal, it's the complete opposite. They want no interest for their card. They want these insane amounts of mileage bonuses where basically you can fly free for the rest of your life. If the company was going to provide that, we'd go out of business and go bankrupt quite quickly. So with Conjoint, what it allows us to do is it allows us to find that middle ground, or that so-called sweet spot. It's not only profitable for the company, but it's also pretty attractive for the customer at the same time. With Conjoint, we were able to understand, what's important to our customers among certain attributes, but also the levels within those attributes at the same time. You can see in the example that things like APR, they're very important, but following that, you kind of see that drop-off that we had. One of the things that we look at is, we're able to kind of mix and match and provide a product that would lead to higher adoption rates, as opposed to just kind of guessing and almost ultimately kind of shooting from the hip and just kind of seeing what customers would want, but ultimately failing. Another thing to note is, as JetBlue, we kind of have that domain knowledge of the products that we offer, and even we know what other companies offer at the same time. So we're very capable of providing something, but we know kind of where we can budge and where we can't budge at the same time. This is important because it really allows us to make these trade-offs, similar to what the customers are going through when they're going through the survey. And this is important because now we're able to kind of adjust our product during the development phase, and ultimately when we go to market, we have something that is perfect for multiple segments of our customer population. in our partnership with Craig, and his team, he was able to provide us with an Excel simulator that allowed us to play with various attributes and kind of see what would not only work for us, but also kind of whet that appetite for the customer. One of the great things is that the data that we were able to provide to Craig, we had certain other attributes that were in there. We had NPS from past studies, trip purposes, so we can kind of cut on our business and our leisure customers to see how they would react to certain offerings at the same time. And it allowed us to kind of tailor our product to various segments. As previously mentioned, we have constraints in certain areas that we can't budge on, namely that APR. Primarily that's set by the banks, and so there's really little to no wiggle room on that. But when we're able to play with other attributes, such as mileage bonuses and the minimum spend for bonuses, we do have control over that, and we're able to offer that to our customers, and that kind of makes up for not having that ideal customer APR at the same time. So we're kind of making sure that our adoption rates would be the same as if a customer had wanted that extremely low APR. As we augmented these variables to make up for the APR, we were able to provide a product with the same potential adoption rates, and it was really ideal. We saw our loyalty team actually go through, and they were very intrigued by the results. And with that simulator, even multiple weeks after we had provided this to them, they were reaching back out to us, asking questions, and they were surprised at the level of customized or creativity with their various products that they could offer. Conjoint, it really allowed us to launch a product where the math is guiding us as opposed to really shooting from the hip, as I was mentioning earlier on. One of the great things that kind of came out of this study was future work with our loyalty team. They saw the depth and knowledge of this study on Conjoint, and we were able to partner with them on future projects, such as benchmarking the loyalty program against other loyalty programs across our industry, and also doing deeper dives into our loyalty population. So even though we were able to kind of take this conjoint analysis on ourselves and we partnered with Craig, it opened up a lot of opportunities, not only within loyalty, but within our commercial and marketing department at the same time. So the value was tremendous to JetBlue, and it actually helped out our team, customer insights, tremendously as we move forward. I'll turn the time back over to Craig, as he'll be walking through some of the mistakes of conjoint analysis.
So thanks for that, Jim. And that was a great example of how a leading brand like JetBlue uses different approaches and different analysis techniques to really understand what their customers are thinking and how can they maximize the customer's experience, and while still finding that sweet spot that's good for their business. So thanks for that. So just a couple final slides here to talk about. Here we could talk about the mistakes or pitfalls of conjoint analysis. Some of the mistakes that we've seen groups make, or we've had to steer groups and organizations that we've worked with in a different direction because to avoid some of these pitfalls is probably the first is that oftentimes groups try to include too many attributes and features. They want to throw the whole kitchen sink at the conjoint analysis study, and while they'll get some understanding about how those different attributes and features stack up to each other, they're going to stretch their respondent so thin, and their preference and and lead to respondent fatigue. The data likely won't be very sound, and the insights they get won't be relevant. And so it's an important exercise to go through the features and the levels and to try to remove those that aren't as important, so that you're only asking the respondent about that which you really want to know. The next that we've seen is that there isn't really clear goals at the onset of the project, so they don't really know what they're trying to understand. We've run a conjoint analysis study, and all they really cared about was price, or different examples of that. But it's clear to make sure that we have the goals established at the onset of the project. And then lastly, the sample size. It's important that we have sufficient sample size when we conduct these conjoint analysis studies. We've started projects with, I can think of specifically a medical research company, and they're asking we were surveying doctors for this conjoint analysis study, and we only ended up getting about, I think, 22 responses, and it was just too small for us to gather and to make any solid claims based on the data. And so these are some of the the mistakes or pitfalls that people can fall into, and that we try to steer people away when running their conjoint analysis studies. And so lastly, here's a slide with my contact information. If you have any questions or want any type of guidance when it comes to conjoint analysis or other advanced marketing studies, feel free to reach out and get in touch with me, and I'd be happy to help.
Thanks, Jim and Craig. Awesome job. And thank you to all of you for joining today. Tune in for the rest of Experience Week for more great content.